Welcome back, everyone, to another segment of the MCR. My name's TJ. I have Mac on the line here with me. Please like, share, and subscribe. And in this segment, we're going to talk about the Canadian situation still. Yes, I'm fully aware of what's happening in Ukraine last night. But until the fog of war clears, we'll say, does anyone really know what's going on there? And, perhaps once when we see the dust settle, it'll give us a better feeling for what exactly the situation is. Besides, I'm not quite willing to let this whole Canadian situation go quite yet. Late yesterday, Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, he revoked the Emergencies Act. But the last I heard, the Conservatives in Parliament, they're not quite through with him yet. Any thoughts so far, Mac?
Well, per your video, I understand that there's supposed to be some parliamentary action that happens before the Prime Minister is allowed to invoke this Emergencies Act, and it sounds like he pulled a Gretchen Whitmer and just went around and he kind of legislated by and did what he wanted.
Yeah, he did what he wanted to, and he had just enough people in Parliament willing to say, "Oh, okay," because and they eventually did have a vote, and it was in favor of Trudeau, something like 180 something to 150 something, who opposed Trudeau. So. But yeah, initially when he instituted the Emergency Act, he did so without a parliamentary vote. So
that's what our esteemed governor here in Michigan does. She just deems it something an emergency, and it's so pressing. We just have to bypass the law and do what she wants.
Yeah. In our previous video, I kind of threw out my theory, my suspicion, my thoughts of, I felt like Canada was turning into a type of cultural proxy war, meaning the Conservatives seem to be for the truckers and the Liberals seem to support Trudeau. And lo and behold, just late yesterday, I read a news report in the Washington Times where it referenced a Trafalgar poll, and they polled 1,080 people, and they said it had a plus or minus of 2.99 percentage points with a confidence level of 95%. So however scientifically it was executed, they felt it was a pretty accurate poll. But the overall result was 55.3%. And this poll was of American voters too, okay? Not Canadian, but American. So 55.3% of American voters disapproved of what Trudeau was doing. 35.1% approved Trudeau's the way he was handling the Emergency Act. Of those polled who identified themselves as Democrat voters, 65.7% of them approved Trudeau, and of those who identified themselves as Republican, 87.3% disapproved of Trudeau's actions. Also, those who claimed no party or other or independent, we'll say, 74.4% disapproved of Trudeau. Any thoughts on that poll there, Mike?
Well, I'm not a big poll fan, as you know, because they can be so manipulated. They don't ask, like, for instance, they'll ask 80% of the participants who happen to be Democrat, given the result that they want to propagate. or, in other surveys, they might only ask Republicans about something. So I don't put much stock into polls anymore. I can't imagine any thinking person would want to put themselves in the Canadian people's place, where the government can come and arrest you for calling a police station and making a complaint or saying the wrong thing on Facebook. It's disgusting, and if they try it here, it's not going to go well for anybody.
Well, I guess when I saw the results of that poll, it kind of I felt gave me validity to my suspicion that what was this was a culture war that we needed to win in Canada, because it's coming to the States, to a town near you, as we say sometimes, but this is just an omen of things to come. And then lo and behold, late yesterday, Trudeau revokes the Emergency Act, and I have a theory to that. And as you know, I like to theorize.
Yeah.
I saw a clip of Jordan Peterson, and I think most everyone know who Jordan Peterson is. He's a well-known Canadian psychologist who was a professor at University of Toronto or Toronto University, or one of those universities, we'll say. But
Harvard University in Boston as well.
Okay. But anyways, Jordan Peterson was saying that he had a conversation with an unnamed Canadian Army officer, and this unnamed Canadian Army officer said to Jordan Peterson, "Get your money out of the Canadian banks." Well, in the last couple days, there's been a horrific spike in people making, as we say, a run on the bank. Okay, and this leads to my theory. I think someone involved in the Canadian financial aspect of their government came to Trudeau and said, "Hey, man, you got to stop this, and you got to stop this now." I mean, because I just feel like, he was, Trudeau was digging in, like a petulant man-child having his tantrum. Okay.
I think that's an excellent description of the young man.
Yeah, he's digging in, having his little tantrum, and then all of a sudden he revokes the Emergency Act. And I just gotta think someone in the banking industry said, "Hey, man, you gotta stop this, and you gotta stop this now." And because I don't know, just a theory of mine. You know what? What do I know? But
well, I think you're probably right, and that may be a tactic that we, the American people, can use. Just, go in there, take all your money out. Of course, and this is what we've done to ourselves by going digital to a large degree, is we've set ourselves up to be easy victims, because when you get your check direct deposited, they can just seize it.
Yeah, and I mentioned that in our last segment or previous segment, where I said, now that a lot of us have direct deposit, taking your money out of the bank, that's just easier said than done, compared to the old days. But so, anyways, here in the United States, we got the truckers, the U.S. convoy. They just left California, and they're going to do their little protest. I think they're going to make some adjustments from what the Canadians did.
Well, I think you're going to have to.
I think there's one, and they're not all in the same convoy, by the way. They're talking about multiple convoys linking up, and some of them aren't even going to go into D.C. They're just going to circle around, and here we go with another one of my theories. I think they're just going to create traffic jams. I don't think they're going to park. I just think by sheer volume and reduction of speed, we'll say, I think they're just going to choke the city with a traffic jam. And one convoy in particular, I guess there's a corridor that runs north from D.C. into the New England area, okay? Well, one of the trucking convoys is going to travel that route and just by sheer presence, volume, and reduction in speed, that in itself is going to create a heck of a traffic jam in that corridor from D.C. north. And I think that could be an adjustment as to just sitting and parking illegally and getting in trouble, we'll say. You know?
Well, they can. It makes you a lot easier to tow when you're stationary, for sure.
Yeah. So and I'll tell you what sucks about our convoy is it's being overshadowed by this Ukrainian crap now. You know? And
well, it's going to have its impact.
Yeah. I think your mainstream rags are gonna, under the guise of Ukraine being so much more important, try to use that as validity of just completely ignoring the U.S. Trucker convoy, you know?
Yeah, we'll talk about, why that border is so important and why our border seems to be so unimportant to Democrats. But we'll talk about that perhaps on Monday. This convoy, I'm going to support it. And you know what? I may join it.
And if I wasn't working, boy, would I like to also. And that's what really sucks. You're gainfully employed, and, you can't even have some fun like this,
Well, see, the protesters for like BLM and Antifa, well, they don't wake up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon because they're going to use what we have in Michigan is bridge cards to go get their food, food stamp card, basically. They're going to go and get their Monster drinks and they'll trade it to the certain particular kind of party stores we have that will trade. They'll buy it for pennies on the dollar. That's so people can go out and buy meth and cigarettes and beer and whatever vice they might have that keeps us supporting them.
Yep. I have one last thought on this whole Canadian situation. This is turning into a long video here.
Okay.
Trudeau was so offended. He took such offense at the Canadian people not trusting the government. And because they didn't trust the government, that almost in itself defined them as of terrorist activity. And I thought, how you talk about condescension and being part of the protected class and everything else. How dare you not trust me? You are a bad person. I just.
Well, they have to demonize a group of people so that they can have justification in the minds of simple people to do the horror they're going to try to do to us.
Yeah, and the Conservatives in the Canadian Parliament have already put him on notice that he's not just going to get a free pass on some of his name calling that he's been doing for the last couple of weeks. So, any final thoughts here, Mac, before we wrap up here?
I think we're looking at some real dangerous days in the weeks ahead. I'll say this early on. We did a video, and you and I were thinking in terms of what might kick off a civil war. Certainly, this wasn't in our minds. And
No.
Marty's, he doesn't think it will ever happen, no matter what happens. But I'm thinking we're getting closer and closer and closer to that event.
Yeah. All right. Well, we need to wrap up. We are at a 14-minute mark here.
All right.
So to those faithful subscribers who are still watching, my name's TJ. Mac's on the line, sharing his thoughts. And with that, we'll end with, as always, be safe, watch your six, and don't tread on me.